Scott and I are catching up. Well, you know what? We'll get into it. Everyone, this is the Fraser LeVay podcast with legend Scott Saunders. I'm going to let him talk about himself, all the things he does, because it just makes me sound cooler that I know him. We met in Las Vegas. I think we met the week before you were in Thailand interviewing Kaka or Kaka. How do we pronounce Kaka?
I think it's Kaka.
Yeah.
But I did say when I interviewed him Kaka, because that's what I'm used to.
Yeah.
He didn't care. But I think I said it the wrong way. But no, man, I'm good. I'm not that cool, honestly. You're cool. You're very cool.
Let me stop things. So Scott texted me right before this, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm just putting ads in my podcast, and I'll be right on." Woo, ads! Some of us are millionaires in our own podcast. Here I am rubbing two sticks together, and you're just, I got Nike. I gotta put their ads in, I'm sure, and Gatorade, and finish up my
not
podcast.
quite that glam. Not quite that glamorous. But yeah, it's all changed for me at the minute, to be honest. I'm trying to understand what I want to do with life next. So I've got like a few little bits of, football here, podcasting, quite enjoying health and fitness at the moment. Living in a cold capital city in England, unlike you, who's as we were saying before we started, you made the move. I think about that every day,
What is like the Costa Rican version of Manchester or of England? Like, is that somewhere in Spain or
probably
Portugal? I guess Portugal's cheap. Like Portugal, if I was closer to my family, would be my number one spot.
I am seeing a lot of Portugal. I've never been. No, I've been once, sorry, but on like a very short holiday. I'd quite like to go back, but from what I hear, it's a good place to be. But like it's been so cold here. We're talking about weather. We're talking about weather on your pod.
Yeah, no, I like it. Let's rub it into everyone's faces.
But I'd love to get out of this cold weather. It's gonna become unbearably hot soon as well. Like it just switches, and it's not great. But hey, life's good in general. Life's good.
Yeah, in general. I lived in London for like 2 months, and I remember it being dark like the entire day. And it was just so miserable.
That is basically the time that we're coming out of now. It's only this week, actually, that at 4:00 it's actually light outside, 4 p.m. So it's quite depressing. It can get quite depressing at times.
That's why you guys and all United fans and fans in general are so angry. I feel like it's just there's nothing else to do, just be angry about football when your team's kind of shit.
It. Yeah, that's basically it.
I'm bringing Scott in to talk all things football or soccer. So as someone in the UK, an Englishman, does Americans calling it soccer, does that bother you, or is that something that we don't care?
No, it used to, but not anymore really, because I did a few months working with Sports Illustrated as well.
Whoa! Yeah. Another one of the ads.
I'm gone now. But yeah, like you kind of had to embrace it. And I was working for a US edition of the site I worked before that as well, which just embraced soccer, and that's just the way it is. So I'm kind of used to it now. It's been like 3 years or so that I've just accepted it, but I'll always call it football. Myself.
Yeah, I think it's more just ignorance than like malice. There's like that's what we know it as. It's not like we've got our football.
Well, you've got the one football, right? So
yeah, exactly,
a popular one.
But yeah, so we wanted to talk with Scott because I haven't watched any football, soccer all year, because right now I'm immersed in American football, college football, which just takes over everything from August to the Super Bowl. So I was like, I want to catch up on what I've missed. I get little snippets here, but also just the casual fan. He's just going to run us down. I've got a bunch of questions for him, teams to watch, big storylines, all that kind of stuff. We'll talk some Manchester United, as he's a huge Manchester United podcaster, as well as all soccer, EPL. But do you want to get into it? I'm gonna start rattling.
Let's do it, man. Let's do it.
Outside of like Real, City, Liverpool, who are, I guess if I want to watch some games, who are 3 to 5 teams I should be watching? I mean, I guess we can include Barca in there, but is there anything that's just piquing your eye? You're like, wow, this is great. Battles, whatever it is.
Bournemouth.
Ooh, I like it. And tell us why. Why Bournemouth?
Of all the teams, but I think they've got like a 13,000 stadium. To the point where there's even been some talk as if they get into Europe and if they get into the Champions League, they actually won't be able to play there because the stadium's too small and doesn't fit regulation. I don't know if that's the case. It might be fine. But they're like pushing for Champions League this year. They're playing really fun football. They've got Andoni Iraola as their coach. I think he played for New York City FC a few years ago. Played for like Athletic Bilbao as a player as well, but he's come in and absolutely revolutionized their team. They recruit really well. They play really high energy, intense football, and it's just good fun. You got Bournemouth and you've got Nottingham Forest as well, who are two teams that are like really pushing it.
That was going to be one of my questions later. Why is Forest good? I don't understand. Can you explain? Did they do something, or what the hell's going on?
Well, it's funny actually because I did a preview show and like predictions at the start of the season, and I said the first manager to go would be Forest manager. So if you're thinking I know anything about football, then I'm just completely. It's always just a curse, so I'm completely wrong. Yeah. But yes, it's funny to be honest because Forest have just gone at it for a few years now with absolutely no care really for financial rules and constraints. They've just kind of gone at it like, yeah, we're just going to pump loads of money into the club. Although, like, maybe I'm doing them a disservice there because they picked up some really good, like, cheap players like Hudson-Odoi from Chelsea for like 3 million quid. He was never worth 3 million, but they've assembled like a really good group of young players, and they're quite good at keeping clean sheets generally. I think they've ascended to like third in the league at the moment. Whether they can keep up that momentum remains to be seen. But they have a lot of fun players like Morgan Gibbs-White, Hudson-Odoi, Chris Wood, New Zealander, absolutely on fire, scoring tons of goals at the moment. They beat Brighton 7-0 the other week, and Brighton are usually the team that everybody looks at and goes, yeah, they're the good team to follow. But it's those two, to be honest, at the moment in the Premier League. And, there's a few others. I think Feyenoord dumped Milan out of the Champions League last night. Can
you explain anything about them? I mean, I had no a touch, but to the people who have no idea where this is or where they play.
Feyenoord's one of the big three teams in the Dutch league.
Okay.
It was a bit of a surprise, actually, because one of Milan's players dived to win a penalty and got sent off because he was already on a booking. So, yeah,
that's amazing.
It's good fun. If that hadn't happened, maybe they'd have gone through. But it's funny because Milan recently signed the striker from Feyenoord, and that guy scored against Feyenoord last night, but also scored against Milan earlier this year.
Oh, wow.
For Feyenoord. So yeah, it's just it's funny. Like the Champions League has changed around. There's some big matches as we record this. Like it's ahead of like City versus Madrid. The Champions League's changed, and I'm not entirely sold on it personally. But there's more games, and if there's one thing we need in football, there's more games. There's just there's so many of them.
And that's actually another one of my questions was the Champions League. If you like the new format, and I don't know the math on it. It was just me looking at the teams. Is it allowed more lesser known teams to be in this final 16? I feel like we're seeing Lille, Rouge. I'm like, wait, what on? Like normally there's a couple, but it seems half the teams are just unique, I guess.
You could say that. Yeah. I think that was the idea behind it. Basically, I think the idea behind it in general is just to have more matches on TV so everyone makes more money and so you really make more money.
Exactly.
That's basically the deal. But it was initially the competition was 32, for 25 years or whatever before this season. They've upped it to 36 and just made it this big, massive league table. So that happened up until the end of January. And the top 8 qualify for the last 16, and then the middle 16 go into this playoff round, which is what we're currently in, to get into the last 16.
Yeah.
So I think it never really. The jeopardy was never there for me, but I think people who watch it were quite split on it. Some people really love it, some people don't. you got to say there's been some entertaining matches, but I think I just lost a bit of the jeopardy for me in the group stages. So, like for example, Man City were absolutely terrible, and they had to beat Bruges in their last game, like Bruges from Belgium in their last game to qualify, and they were terrible throughout it, and they fell 1-0 down, and they managed to come around and win, but they've been awful all year, you know. So I think a little bit of the jeopardy was pushed out of it, but we'll see what the last 16 teams end up being. Like a couple of upsets in the last round. Like last night, so maybe, but eventually the best teams will rise to the top and go through anyway, I would think.
Yeah, and like I've been definitely much more of a casual football soccer fan this year. Just with American football, I've been doing so much more podcasting and writing on it, so I didn't find myself watching any real Champions League because it was team out Y versus a team I've rarely see. So I didn't care. There was no kind of, like you said, heavyweights or jeopardy of something interesting going on. And it also got me thinking last night when I was thinking about you couldn't fall asleep, had the baby, 4 a.m. Like, oh, I can't wait to talk to Scott. I started rolling where I don't think they'll lose money on it, but now Lille doesn't have the following or Bruges doesn't have the following. Real does. Or do you guys call Real Madrid Real or Madrid or always Real Madrid?
I think no, it's Real Madrid generally. Real Madrid generally. I don't think we give them one. There. Yeah. There's too many Reals out there, and you can't say Madrid really without thinking of Atletico as well.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, you kind of have to go full name. Real Madrid Club de Football. Yeah.
So I'm thinking if you have 1 or 2 Real Madrid games, like big games around the world, are watched by millions and millions of people, where you have 5 Bruges games or 5 Lille games. So while you have more, you're not maybe making as much money at the higher ups because you don't have the following. You have the jersey sales, the worldwide appeal. So it's kind of interesting where, okay, great, we've got more games and we have Bruges and Lille in the round of 16, but we potentially won't have Real Madrid or City, who is the most watched teams in the world right now. So I don't know.
Yeah, throughout it, like there were so many games on, but the last round of games that they put on in the group stages, everybody played at the same time. So there were like 18 matches at the same time, which is just too much for anybody. It makes a good red zone for football kind of thing. But yeah, it to be honest, it didn't actually capture my imagination all that much. And I think, but what was happening in the group stages before that was the best teams, like they'd all be seeded. The Real Madrids would get maybe one difficult team. They would end up finishing in the top 2 places, and then you'd have the worst of teams just falling off anyway. So, yeah, I think it's all a big plan to kind of help more teams earn more money and give them a bit more exposure. But like for me, like just in general, I'm not gonna sit down and watch like 2 teams at the bottom of the French league, battle on a Saturday night. I just don't care enough. There's too much football. So I don't know how other people are feeling. Maybe that's the hope, but it's money just funnels to the top, and it still is.
Yeah, well, I'll skip around then since we're on this trend. FIFA corruption. It doesn't seem to be. It doesn't seem to be going anywhere with the Saudi Arabia World Cup and such. Do you see it getting better, equal, or thoughts of it improving, or it doesn't exist because you're in the media and you can't talk about it because you might get killed?
I spoke to someone at FIFA recently, right? And I see both sides. Let's say I see both sides. I was actually at the Qatar World Cup for like 2.5 weeks.
Okay.
Which was interesting. It was really interesting. Obviously, there's loads of like talk about like where the money comes from, and obviously that's completely a conversation that people should have because it's something that needs to be discussed. But I think what FIFA's side of the argument is that they're trying to bring football to different places that don't always get it. But there's been a hell of a lot of investment going into Saudi football, so
so why is it
see some of the attendance? I don't know, right?
Let's get in Liberia or Cameroon. Why are we in Saudi Arabia?
But I think that money that is coming in from Saudi. No, I don't want to speak out to it. Like, I'm still a journalist,
Yeah.
But I think that money that Saudi are kind of plowing into football sees its way into FIFA, and FIFA then look at that, they get that money in, and they say that they'd like to go and invest that money into different areas of the world that need it. So like more money in Central America, for example, and maybe the teams that don't, or the nations that really don't have enough money to develop their game as it is. They do say that is quite important to them. And I do think the money goes there, but obviously, like I just said, the money always still funnels to the top anyway. So it's difficult to kind of get it right.
And if I clip this out, I won't put these words in Scott's mouth, but that's pretty much every dictator on earth typically says, oh yeah, we're going to make all this money for ourselves so we can give it to lesser people. That's what to grow the game. So let's hope. All right. So that's their
take on it anyway.
That's their take.
That's their take on it.
So on this kind of realm of overarching soccer, I make you the czar of football soccer, and you can make 2 or 3 changes that you think automatically you can do anything you want. What are a couple changes you want to make, whether it's VAR or moving teams or XYZ? Like where would you do?
I honestly didn't expect this question. So the first thing that came to my mind, right, was stopping the clock.
Ooh, I like it.
I'd like to see that happen. Maybe make football like 60 minutes or something like that, away from 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And stop the clock just to make sure that there's no kind of time wasted. I don't really know how this... What we see a lot of the time is just teams kind of sitting in and trying to waste time. And there was a point a couple of years ago where they were adding like 15 minutes or 11 minutes onto the end of matches, and everyone was like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
And it ended up the players getting loads of injuries, and that's still the case. And I've got my other thing as well, actually. So if we're talking about that, maybe I'll just finish this point. Maybe make the game shorter, because it might mean that there's more play in time. Also, I would love there to be less football. I would love there to be less football, because there's too much, and I'm sick of it. I gotta be honest. There is too much to keep up with. The Champions League's just like I say, just expanded. The World Cup is expanding to 48 teams. I can only imagine how the players feel because they're playing it. I'm sick of watching it. So maybe it's just because I support United and they're awful.
That could be it too.
But that could be it too. I'm sick of watching it just because I feel like I've seen it all before. Clubs play like 70 matches a season in some cases. There's a Club World Cup at the end of this year, which is in the US actually. Oh. And it's got all of the big teams like Real Madrid, Chelsea, Man City, Bayern, I think, are in it as well. And they're all going to try and win this Club World Cup, which is an extended version of a cup that existed, right? So they said that this is a bigger version. So there's 32 teams from around the world that are playing in this cup. There used to be 6 teams in it from each continent. So they moved that to the summer. But then they also reintroduced an old competition in the place of the competition that they just grew.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's too much football. I have to be very selective with kind of what I'm watching. And I have to bear in mind to kind of move away from it as well, because it's just too much. Yeah. So if I could make 2 changes, I'd make the matches shorter and I'd make less matches. So what does that tell me?
Yeah. I was even thinking, I've got things that layer on there, but imagine you're making like $35K a year and you work for one of these clubs. It's like, oh my God, you're just like a, whatever position you are, accounting or whatever it is. Like,
I know, right? I know. It's just too much of it. And maybe I'm one of the minority. I don't know. I think people love it.
No, I think people think that as well. And I know they did that study last year or 2 years ago where, who was it? Well, basically only 60% of the game, the ball's in play. Yeah. And one team was like the worst at it. They were one of the top of the table. Newcastle, I think. So they had something like, right, yeah, like 50% of the game, the ball was in play. It's like, what are we doing here? So I think you're bang on with that. And I enjoyed the extra time, like the 15 minutes. But then after a while, you're right. It's like, now these games are forever. Players are putting an extra 20% of a game in. And like intense part too, because it's not like you can just kind of chill. That's when you're typically going your hardest, because maybe it's a close one. So I like shortening the time. That kind of helps both those things. And then the amount of games, I'm with you. So here it's like they added the college football playoff. So here I am every Sunday. You know, I've got a baby, the missus, and I'm watching football every Sunday. There's also games on Thursday, games on Monday, and then there's college on Saturday, which I tried to just only watch a couple here and there. But Sunday, I'm booked from like 10 until 8. Before we started the relationship, I'm like, look, Sundays I can hold the baby, but this is it. So we go through like 4 or 5 months of this, and then there's like more football, like the playoff. I'm like, I know I said Sundays are off, but now there's a playoff game on Monday, and there's this on Thursday, and it's just nonstop. Like you can't get away from it. So
it's funny actually. I went to Austin in September last year. I went to watch the Longhorns.
Oh yeah, incredible, right?
Which it's mad. It's absolutely mad. Where I talk about like football here and how intense it is. And then I go to this stadium, I think it's like 90, 100,000 people or whatever, like proper stacked out. And my seats were like kind of at the back, at the top. And I was like, it's like that, you know, in The Simpsons where Maud Flanders like falls off the top of the stadium.
Yes,
that's kind of how I felt. I wasn't right that far back. If I'd have gone any further, I'd been like, oh my god, I'm terrified. But yeah, it's crazy to see. Like, and I kind of get it in college football because you know all the big NFL teams are like you have to cover so much ground to be so general that I think people want something more local. And look, you feel it. It was cool. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, as I I went to Texas Tech, which is about 5-6 hours up the road. Yeah, and it's honestly the only things I care about now are Team Canada, anything that, and Texas Tech football or basketball, because like it appears as if my school is better than your school, my education is better if we do better, which obviously makes no sense. But that's kind of like what it is, right? Where it's like football, like even my NFL team is the Vikings. I'm like, I don't give a shit about them. Half of them are going to be gone. Half of them are overpaid. You know, like I'll be a fan, but I don't actually get super excited. I'm just like, these are some strangers who don't give a shit about the team. You know, I guess if I was from like Minnesota, I'd have a bit more care, but you know what I mean? You're just kind of watching these high price guys who they just leave for the next big amount of money, whatever that is. And
it's the same case like everywhere you turn, right? And it does bring up a disconnect. And there's a lot of people like going back to football or soccer for a minute. Like, there's a lot of people who just feel a bit disconnected with like prices of tickets and amount.
That's
like it's so stupid. Like in the US, for example, I think anybody can watch Premier League matches, right? Because they're all on TV as long as you pay. I don't know which provider offers them, but you know, here there's still a blackout at 3 p.m. on a Saturday when all the matches are played. So you can pay, I think I end up paying like 150 quid a month or something like that, 150 pound a month all in for, obviously other things come with it, but mainly for football, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, the team I want to watch aren't on TV. I can't watch them.
Oh my God.
Like it's crazy. It's crazy. And that's Man United as well.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine what people think of like if you support Bournemouth or Forest, like I say, or these teams. Like it's a hell of a lot of money for not a lot of access. So.
That's the thing. And like going to games now, I don't even care about going to games unless it's something enormous. It's just you go, it takes an hour, 2 hours to get in the stadium. I'm paying 20 quid for a beer, 18 for a shitty hot dog. And like, oh my God. I remember I went to Los Angeles. They've got a Dodger dog, like the infamous Dodger dog. And I was so excited for this hot dog. And it literally was just like a long hot dog with nothing on it. I thought they would put like fixins and all. I was like, no, it's just a shitty boiled hot dog I could have done at home. What are we doing here?
Yeah, that sounds awful.
Yeah. Back to football. I have a few places I want to go. We'll go, since we're talking we haven't talked to United yet. We've gotten plenty of United stuff. City Football Group. So for anyone who doesn't know, City Football Group is a multi-club ownership group, which is a genius idea. They own 11 or 12 clubs around the world. So like New York FC, a team in Brazil, Manchester City, obviously. I think I got a few. There's a team in Mumbai, China, Japan, everywhere.
Melbourne, Girona. Yeah. Loads of teams. Yeah.
And so what they were doing, which I think they're starting to put a squash to, or they did put a squash to, was you could essentially loan your own teams. Like, hey, this player's doing good. I'll take him for cheap, and it won't count towards my contract, and blah blah blah. So I think it's genius. And there's a few other teams that do it, or clubs. Like I had Red Bull, Ineos, and more.
Yeah.
But do you see this continuing, or is like football putting a stop to kind of shared money, shared squad, that sort of thing?
So they're very. It's funny because there's a lot of stuff going on around what you can and can't do, right? So Ineos, for example, own Nice in France and Lausanne in Switzerland, and this time last year bought Man United, or bought a controlling stake in Man United, the football operation. So when United qualified for the Europa League at the end of last season when they won the FA Cup, there was all this: can United and Nice play in the same competition because they're owned by the same company? They managed to get around it, but they had to prove that there was no like controlling operation from Ineos of Nice. So the people had to be separate. Like I don't know, but they got around it, right? But I do genuinely see it growing more. I think Ineos are probably one of the latest teams to join the party. Chelsea do it as well. They got a few clubs they got Strasbourg in France and a few other clubs as well, I think. And City is probably the best and biggest example of it. The problem is, what these clubs do? They have a big club, right? So a big club like Man City, and then they have a club like Girona, who've been in the Champions League this season, but are like generally not a big club in Spain. City will then buy young players to put in Girona or put in Troyes, who are in France.
Yeah,
and they will develop in those places, get better, but they shouldn't really be playing at that level. You know, it's just City have the money, or that group has the money in order to buy them and put them in one of their teams. So as they can develop, Man City then signed this guy called Savinho last summer, who was playing for Girona, I think, or like one of the teams in Spain, was actually owned by Troyes.
And he looked unreal, at least in the Euros. He hasn't done as much this, but oh my God, I was like, who is this fucking guy? Wait, City has him? This isn't fair.
Yeah, so what they do is it's a way of getting around, because young players nowadays are just the most costly players there are because of the potential that they have. So you see prices driven up, and if anything, players at age 28 or 30 are not actually worth that much, but they have high wages, so they're difficult to shift on. City have done it as well as they can, and I think it's working. And that's probably the model for a lot of teams to follow. Like Chelsea, for example, buy a lot of players and send them out on loan to Strasbourg with no intent of ever using them. They just want to sell them on. So it's kind of gamifying it, and maybe it's not fair to other clubs that aren't owned by a big cohort of a big company. You know, you could say that the competitive element is being lost a little bit. But hey, if that's the way it's going, they just have to make rules to clear it up and make sure that there's no nothing untoward going on.
Yeah. On the ownership side, then it also kind of leads to Wrexham. Do you see any other people? Obviously, not everyone is Ryan Reynolds. I think he's as incredible for a multitude of different ways, but doing the whole crowdsourcing a team, sponsors, kind of making a show out of it. Do you see more of that happening, or has it happened more that I don't know about? Because obviously it worked for them. Not to say it can work for everyone, but
I'm trying to think if it's happened for anybody else. But I'm actually Welsh, so yeah. So Wrexham getting that, like North Wales, obviously. Yeah, I'm from South Wales, so I've never watched Wrexham. I'm more like a Newport guy.
Gotcha.
But when that happened, I just thought that was amazing, personally, because Wrexham were a club on the verge of like death. You know, they didn't have anything. Like they're on the verge of ruin. There was multiple times where they just essentially were nearly going to go out of business. And now Ryan Reynolds has come in and just like energized a town completely. And it's really nice to see as well, because obviously it's my home country as well. Made a big series out of it. I think one of their star striker, Paul Mullin, was in Deadpool as well.
Right. Yeah.
So recently. I think it was the most recent film,
Mm-hmm.
and it's proper. It's fun for me. That's my perspective on it. But again, the competitive element means that there's so much money coming in. I think they've got sponsors on their shirts that no club in that division could ever dream of getting.
Right, exactly.
Therefore, no club in that division could ever dream of getting that kind of money.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of, like, for example, Wrexham got promoted last year from one league and were at the top of the next division up, like straight
Instantly,
off.
yeah.
And you rarely ever see that happen.
Mm-mm.
But if you're injected with that kind of money, then it's the competitive element is called into question. But for me, I think, like, selfishly, as a Welsh guy, I think, like, we need more money like that and more shine on Wales. So it's a good series as well. Actually, it's a good series.
Absolutely,
I've enjoyed it. So it's positives for me. But like, Tom Brady's got a hold of Birmingham as well, and they're the two teams who are fighting at the top of, like, the third league in England at the moment. So yeah, see how it goes. But for me, I'm for it myself.
Yeah, I think just all these series, like, even my parents don't give a shit about soccer. They watched all of Wrexham. They enjoyed it. And now they don't care about Wrexham, but they follow a game here or there or see it in the sports ticker. Like, oh, wow, we'll watch. So I'd like to see more of that. Like, I even find myself, I'll watch the City documentary on Amazon Prime, or they're in the championship now, Leeds. I watch Leeds, and I literally find myself, or I'll do the same thing in American football, rooting for that team, even though, like, I would hate them.
Yeah.
But you're just watching now, you're like, oh, I care about these guys. They're my friends, even though I'm just watching them on TV, you know? But it's great for the sport. I'm like, oh my God, now I enjoy watching Leeds, or watching, what's his name, who went to City, he flamed out, but
which
like
guy?
an 8. Well, he was Leeds' best player, and then he ended up doing shit at City, I think. Was it City?
Oh, Calvin Phillips.
Yes.
Calvin Phillips.
Yeah.
So he's nowhere to be seen nowadays. So it was the worst move he could have ever made in his career.
Exactly. I was so excited to watch Calvin
work.
Phillips, and then I was like, oh, now he's terrible. So
can't even get in West Ham's team. I can't remember where he is now.
Yeah.
Ipswich. He's at Ipswich. He can't get in their team. So yeah, sad.
It's so interesting. We'll talk about this later about levels of players, but yeah, there's a couple players I'm going to bring up later when I argue something with you, not with you, but with other people that I have an argument about. But Grealish is actually a good example. I always think there's players who they should stay the 10 at a mediocre club and just be the hero. You know, when the ball comes to you all the time, everyone's looking for you, you're the guy. It's such a better feeling than you go to this other club and you're just nonstop pressure. The ball's not always coming to you. You have no trust from the other players like you did at your old squad. So yeah, Grealish and Phillips are a good example. Although Grealish hasn't done terrible, but you know what I mean.
Well, Grealish is a good example because he was one of my favorite players to watch when he was at Villa, just because of, like, how much of a character he was and how good he was at dribbling. But he joined City, and you could argue, probably when he looks back on his career, he could probably say, yeah, I won the treble, I won the Champions League, I won multiple Premier Leagues, it was worth it. But in reality, he cost 100 million quid, and the best version of Jack Grealish was at Aston Villa. Like, just because he had the freedom to be able to play his way in that team. Yeah. And the way that Pep Guardiola manages teams, it kind of sucks the individuality out of the players in order for the team to be good. And you see it sometimes with players who only play for Pep. Like, there's a big thing with Phil Foden, for example. He's one of City's best players, was Player of the Year last year. When he plays for England, he's crap, you know, because he doesn't play in the same system.
Yeah.
So, like, it kind of works both ways. But, you know, it's a shame with Grealish for me. I'd have liked him at United before he joined City, but I think for the sake of his own career, he probably made the best move.
Yeah, I always wish, like, even going back to, like, Thierry Henry, I just liked it when he played back in England because it was another team to watch. Like, you would never typically watch them as much without him. And then you just went to, obviously, a team where everyone watches it. Like, I'm already watching. I just like, stay in your own little, no, I guess Arsenal isn't little, but you know what I mean? Just stay where you're the hero. Don't go for the super clubs is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, there's a good argument for it. Like, if anything, the super clubs are the clubs that aren't run properly. So yeah, you're probably better off joining a club that knows what the hell they're doing. You know?
Yeah. I was going to ask you, we'll switch to some EPL and some United. Similar to a question I asked earlier, but I make you the head of Manchester United. What are you doing? Are you clearing house? Are you keeping the manager around for a while? which I'll have another question about that. But like, what are some how can everything kind of be turned around a little bit?
It's funny because we were talking about putting ads in an episode. I just did a podcast on clearing out the squad.
Okay. All right.
It's on YouTube and on Spotify and Apple as well. But they're £1 billion in debt.
Okay,
Manchester United.
So we clear the debt first.
That's the best thing to do, but I don't think the debt's getting cleared anytime soon because the Glazer family who have the Bucks own it, and they bought the club leveraged with debt.
Okay.
And it doesn't come down because the interest is so high. Like they've paid £1 billion in interest on it since 2005,
and
which is just
debt,
mad.
In layman's term, how does this debt correlate to the squad, to the manager, to even the ownership group? Like, how is that kind of affecting the on-field play? And how can they can't get out of it, like you said?
So obviously they can't bring the debt down because the interest is so high. I think they paid like £18 million in debt interest in the last 6 months or something like that, and that's a really good or a third of a top player, like in terms of a transfer fee. The debt is something that sags the club down. And there was a big decision last year about whether it would be state owned or by Qatar, or if Ineos would get it. But the Glazers, it's unfortunate, and people want to say full sale. And that would be what I would love that as well. I would love the debt to be cleared, but in reality, the Glazers have played an absolute blinder because they are in full control. They're getting no flack for it. They barely put a penny of their own into the club in 20 years, and they've taken United from the best club in England to 15th in the league, with loads of debt, with loads of players who are on massive contracts so they can't shift. And it leaves every manager who gets a chance completely unable to do anything. So Ruben Amorim's the latest one. How realistic that is, I don't know, to be honest, in terms of clearing the debt. But what they can do, and what I did on this podcast, was what they need to change this transfer strategy and start shifting out some of these high earning players and giving better contracts and profiling players and bringing players in who can actually run. Whereas there's a big thing going on around Casemiro at the moment. He was one of the best midfielders of his generation. But
it was 20 years ago in his generation.
Well, it was not even that. 3-4 years ago, he was still amazing. But what United want to do is play this high energy system where they run box to box and they keep going all day. And Casemiro's just never been that type of player anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just a lack of correlation between what they're trying to do in transfer strategy and what they're actually doing in the transfer market. I feel like that's starting to change, but there's so many hangovers I've actually got a document that I prepared. Not for this.
No, I want to hear it all. We got 2 hours.
Not this specifically, but there's 10 players that United aren't using at the moment.
Okay.
In terms of players who are out on loan, Rashford's gone out on loan, Sancho, Casemiro, that they owe £111 million to in wages, and they're not using them.
Yeah.
So
simple-ish fix.
Yeah, it's a good place to start, but the problem is when you pay these players so much money, you can't actually shift them because no other clubs pay the type of contracts that United pay.
Yeah.
So United, for example, have to pay Casemiro £300,000 a week for another 15 months or something like that, unless they find somebody to buy him.
Yeah,
and he played one game the other day. It was his first game in the Premier League for this year. So
wow,
yeah, they run absolutely terribly. But there is a new group of people coming in now who are trying to fix that. It's just with the debt, with the revenues being down, it's a mess. I don't know how long it'll take to fix.
So selling off some players essentially is a good start to kind of getting back under a little bit.
Yeah, they're trying to do it, and maybe around before the start of next season, maybe you'll see a bit of a different team because there's 4 players out of contract. There's 4 players they want to sell, and there's probably a couple of others they might sell who are favourites, but could actually be sold for a lot of money that they can reinvest in players that they need and players that they want. So I don't know, man. It's a proper difficult time at the moment. That's what I do first, though.
Yeah. Speaking of managers, how long do you think, again, you're the head of United or any club, how long should you give a manager unless they're absolute trash? But like, what would be, I have my feelings on it, which I'll say after, but like, what's kind of, how many years would you like to see a manager in place?
I think the ideal at the minute is not the ideal. The average, I think, is about 18 months.
And how do you feel about this?
It's probably accurate, I guess.
Okay.
The problem is it depends on how the club operates from the top.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, in United's case, they buy a lot of players that don't necessarily fit in with the strategy of the club. The strategy keeps changing. They hire a coach who has one strategy and then hire another coach who has another strategy. They have players in each squad who don't actually fit the strategy of either coach. And then they just keep adding to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think maybe you need I think Ruben Amorim will get about 18 months personally. And if it's not turned around in the middle of next season, maybe this time next year, I think he could probably be in danger of going. But I think he's got the benefit of having people upstairs who are aligned with what he wants. So it depends really. Like if you take it depends on how well the club is run. If there's another club that's run with cohesion from the top, that has a plan from the top, that it shows up in their coach and in their players as well. If they have a bad 3 months or whatever, it depends on the pressure, as well. If they have a bad run, maybe they can make a change, but chances are they'll probably hire another coach in the same ideal as the coach that they had before. So it just keeps going. Whereas there's other clubs like United that just go from this end of the spectrum to the other end, and it just looks like a mess.
And I was a Ten Hag apologist. It got a little bad.
Me too.
Yeah, towards the end. But I'm like, wait, you're just going to bring in someone, the exact same thing's going to happen. Like, give a guy, I like maybe 3 years, unless they're absolute bollocks, but like 3 years to get the players in he wants. But I guess also, what percent of control did he have on signing the players they signed during his tenure? Like, did he have quite a big say, do you think?
Yeah,
so
probably.
Was that kind of on him? Because he brought in a lot of his old players from Ajax, right?
Yeah, like it's probably what meant he went in the end. But really, like there shouldn't be, like managers should have their own input into the players that they sign. But really, the club should always be safeguarding themselves and saying, oh, well, if you don't work, we're stuck with this player. So the club needs to have a plan. And the best clubs out there, like the reason why Man City, or one of the reasons why Man City have been so successful over the last few years, is because they've had a plan from the very top. They sign players that Pep Guardiola will need, that fit the profile of what he needs. And if Pep Guardiola ends up leaving, they'll probably hire somebody in the ilk of playing style of Pep Guardiola. So it should mean that the continuation is there. In terms of your 3 years point, like I think in an ideal world, 3 years is probably what everybody would need in order to make a proper impact and to turn it around properly. It just depends on the size of the club. If the club's big enough and it sits in 15th like United are, and revenues are down and the club is in massive debt and you don't see any way of turning this around, generally a manager gets a lot less patience. So that's probably why Ten Hag ended up going. He had 2 years, 3 months in the end or something like that. But in the end, like with him, I think we probably should have seen more out of him. And look, he did have a massive impact on the transfer strategy. But at the same time, he wanted a player like Anthony, right? And he was signed for 86 million quid when they could have signed him for 40 million quid or 50 million quid 3 months earlier. Yeah. So, he's always going to say, I want this player for my team. But it's the people who are doing negotiating that they probably need to have a hard stop somewhere that isn't that. And now he's out on loan, like at Real Betis, for doing well. He scored like a scissor kick volley the other day.
Yeah,
and I'm like, what? This is just so funny.
He was my least favorite player on earth because he literally just cut the ball inside. Like if I was playing with him and he was not putting the ball in, I would lose my mind. I'm like, put the fucking ball in. Don't just turn into your left and shoot at the goal from 35, 50 yards out all the time. Can you please put the ball in the box, you motherfucker? I hate you.
It's exactly it, though. It's exactly it.
I did a bet with my United mates, and at the start of last year, and I was like, he's the worst player on earth. I'll give me any player; they'll do better and perform more than Anthony. So I had Mount versus him with one friend, and I had Sancho versus him with another friend.
Wow.
So Mount gets hurt and never instantly, and then Sancho all shit hits the fan with him.
Calls a manager a liar and gets kicked out. Yeah,
we made this bet in August or July. There was one goal scored between all three by like February of the next year, and it was
who scored it?
It was Anthony versus like some 4th division team in the FA Cup. It was
that was Newport. That was Newport. That was my team.
It was the worst bet in the history of bets. But yeah, and I guess that brings me to managing as well. I thought with Ten Hag, he was, I guess, going from Ajax to Manchester United. You go from dealing with probably a lot younger kids, right? Like excited, youthful exuberance. And I think you, as a manager, you have to be as good on the field as you are with egos. So the second you run into Ronaldo and a Rashford, they're not these kids you're running at Ajax and is it Sporting that Amram came from. It's just, I think they need to bend at some point with some of these stars and have to. Pep can talk to anyone, right? Like he can go and talk to the 14-year-old. He can go talk to the 50-year-old, and everyone loves him. Everyone understands him. Everyone respects him. And it's almost like the chicken or the egg of, okay, you can try and make Ronaldo or Rashford bound out to you, but you also need to have them respect you, I guess. So it's, I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Rafael Varane did an interview, came out today, and he said that he felt like Ten Hag always had to have somebody on the outside so it could demonstrate his authority.
Yeah.
So he had Ronaldo, got rid of him. Then he kicked out Sancho because he called him a liar.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a point where he kicked Varane out of the team as well. And Varane's like one of the best defenders of his generation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably right. But I think what managers always strive for with, like Amorim, for example, right? He's now in. From what I understand about Amorim, he doesn't want any egos at all. He wants players who are just going to do the job. So I don't know who will end up going. But like your Bruno Fernandes's, for example, wouldn't surprise me at all if, well, United are doing crap anyway, so maybe that he'll end up wanting to go. But it wouldn't shock me at all because he doesn't look like a natural fit in the team. And there's a lot of these players.
And that goes to my point with Aaron. It sounds like to me, if I didn't know, he's 80 years old. He's a dinosaur. Because sure, you can do that at Sporting. You can't have a team with no egos at Manchester United or Manchester City. And I'm sure Haaland and KDB, maybe not much of an ego, but they all have egos. They just need to respect you. And so no one's going to talk back to Pep because he has that respect, where I just don't think you can rule with a controlling fist at a major club with people making millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
I don't know. I think it depends on how well you're backed, really.
Yeah.
It depends on the personalities. Like players could have egos and stuff, but if their ego means they're not going to run, I don't think Pep would have. Man City were close to signing Ronaldo at one point, and that's when United jumped in. But I could never really have seen Pep getting Ronaldo to press, So it's tough. Like managers are so different nowadays in the fact they have their own ideals, and it has to be that way. And they have a tactical plan which will never change or barely changes. Whereas like your old Ferguson kind of guys he'd always rule with an iron fist, but let players had egos, he just knew how to control them. So maybe that's a lost art. But yeah, like it's changed nowadays, and like we'll see whether Amorim actually gets to see this out. I hope he does. So I quite like it. I think he's pretty cool, So
yeah, well, that's what I think coaches need to adapt. Like back then, you could do this and you could rule with iron fist. Where now players have just they don't care as much as maybe older players did. Now I'm sounding old, but there's so many more outlying things like sneaker deals and being a celebrity that didn't exist back then. So I think they have to mold a bit to the players we have now, which we see in the NFL. There's a lot younger coaches who they see it's players don't
understand
just care.
The players. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah. Staying with United, are United fans the most fanatical in all of football? It just seems like since I've run the Manchester United convention, I'm in all these Facebook groups and all these groups. I think all football fans are fanatical, but it's just lose a game, lose their mind. Win a game, we're the greatest of all time. Lose a game, fire the coach. It's just a seesaw. I'm like, oh my goodness. Maybe it goes back to the start of what we talked about, where people are just grumpy all the time.
Yeah, I don't speak Spanish, right? So I don't know for sure. I'm not part of like the Real Madrid, Barcelona stuff, but I put them maybe on a par or maybe just ahead of United. I don't know, but there was a point where United loved to talk about how many like social impressions they get on Twitter or across different social media platforms and brag about it. That was what they did a few years ago. But the problem, maybe you just see that with United because they're so useless at the moment and everybody loses their minds. And it's just easy for people to have their phones in their pockets. They can go onto a social media and say, this guy is an idiot. Or like, I could swear, there's other stuff which is said, which is probably a little bit more harsh than what I've just said. But it really depends on, I think it personally is just a cultural thing nowadays. Like, Chelsea are particularly bad as well. Arsenal fans, every time a decision goes against them, they kind of hound referees and threaten them with, like there was an example of a red card the other week, and it was one of those where it could have been a yellow, could have been a red, but in real time it looks like a silly decision, and then everybody kind of hounds the referee for making the decision because it's cost them 2 points in a title race they were expected to win by a lot of people. So I don't know. I think it's just a case of people having their phones in their pockets and getting frustrated and wanting everything to be right for them at once. I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a cultural thing. I don't know
if there's an answer. It just seems it's incredible just how Topsy, like, love it, hate it. It's like, oh my God, can we just like take a breath?
I'm just in a permanent version of not liking it at the moment.
Yeah, perfect. You talked about the EPL. I've just got a few more questions for you. But on the EPL, can anyone catch Liverpool, or is this done and dusted?
I think Arsenal can, personally. I think they can. I hope Nottingham Forest can, but I don't think they will. The problem Arsenal have is they don't have a striker. Because they backed Kai Havertz, who has scored a Champions League winning goal. Isn't really a striker, but they went big on him. And now he's pulled up with a hamstring injury. I think he's out for like the rest of the season. And you think with all they got Saka's injured as well. He's out for a few months. If they were fully fit, Liverpool have got 2 games. We're recording this, but Liverpool play Aston Villa in a couple of hours' time as we record this. I could see Marcus Rashford doing something against Aston Villa. I don't know. Against Liverpool. I don't know. For Aston Villa. If Aston Villa take any points off Liverpool got Man City at the weekend. If they don't win one of those games, or maybe both of those games, and Arsenal do, and they keep up, I think they're 7 points clear at the moment. But if they drop points in one of those games and Arsenal keep the heat on, Arsenal go to Liverpool in the third last game of the season, which could be it could be the one that everybody should watch. Like people have said it's over for a while. I don't know. I think I'm just seeing some signs in Liverpool which may suggest that they're running out of a bit of steam. But I don't know. We'll see. I would certainly prefer Arsenal win the league than Liverpool, because if Liverpool win the league, then they've got 20 and United have 20, and they're the only team to have 20 in England. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right. I think if it was flipped, I would say I could see Arsenal losing it, but having, such good leaders in Liverpool, they don't, they've been there before, where Arsenal is known for just blowing it at the end. So,
you'd probably find out a hell of a lot more over the next few days, I would say, with Liverpool.
Yeah. So I'm going to get to some Concacaf soccer, and this is when it's getting bad. The podcast is going downhill. But I just had a few questions for you before I let you go. First, how do you rate Serie A? Like, what, as a football fan, is it third, fourth, second? Do you care? Do you watch it?
Italy.
Yes, Italy.
Used to love it when I was a kid.
It was good back then, right? They had
It was like the richest league in the 90s. It's where all the good players would go, like your Ronaldos and this kind of thing. Now they kind of have like groups of Premier League cast-offs because all the money's in England. And like there's certain elements of it which are really entertaining and really fun. But I come back to the point of, like, I think there's too much football on. I just can't keep up with it anymore. Like, I'll know what's going on in the league. And maybe if there's a big, like, Juventus Inter game or something, I'll watch it. But it depends on my mood, really. It's not what it used to be. But I think the teams in Italy are not as strong as, like, Juventus have fallen off. The Premier League teams, your Bayerns, your Reals and Barcelonas and PSGs are probably levels above them. Or any team in Italy at the minute. Yeah,
and I think only Milan and Juventus do well in Champions League because they're playing such soft competition in their league themselves. So they're, they can rest a little bit more, where, Liverpool or City or United are playing nonstop hard games, FA Cup, then, much better competition.
Spain are the team that always seems to win in European competitions, though. So I don't know. Italy haven't had a great time.
No.
Apart from Atalanta, who won the Europa League last season. I should say that.
That's all right. So I was going to say, I'm leading this. I have a lot of American friends. I'm Canadian, but I live in the United States. And everyone likes to say, Pulisic. I'm like, Pulisic is scoring in a retirement league. It is trash. Stop talking to me about this. Gun to your head. You're an outsider looking in. Are Jonathan David and Alphonso Davies better than Pulisic, Giovanni Reina, or Ricardo Pepi?
Give me the names again. So you got Jonathan David and Alphonso Davies
versus Christian Pulisic, Giovanni Reina, and Ricardo Pepi.
I think Alphonso Davies is far and away the best one.
Yeah, perfect. Ding.
Scored last night, actually.
Yeah.
Where would I put? I'd maybe rank Pulisic second in this.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
But
That's right.
Jonathan David third.
Okay.
So Pepe's scoring. So 2 of the top 3, I would say.
All right, we can deal with that.
I will say Alphonso Davies is like far and away the best one of the 3.
Thank you. All right, that's good. That's good to know. One who I think might be the best American is Anthony Robinson. I feel like he's been playing really well.
Oh, he's having a great year. Yeah. Having a great year. But it still doesn't,
Yeah.
Alphonso Davies is the best player in that North American conversation for me.
Yeah, I feel like it's an exciting time for Canada. We might have a chance to, I don't know, just be make it into the round of 16, something like that.
It'd be good. Love it.
But, yeah. Well, those are the questions I had for you. Just wanted to fire a bunch of soccer catch up. Oh, before we go, are there like a few younger players that you might, people I'm sure have heard of, but maybe casual fans haven't heard of, to watch? Because like my favorite thing to do is back in the US is go watch high school football, high school basketball. And 3 years later, all of a sudden that kid's a star. And you're like, oh, I remember watching him when he was 15, 16, whatever.
Are you looking for players who are from like remote, smaller teams?
Or just, no. They can even be younger on a good team. Doesn't matter.
There's one in Arsenal at the moment. He's playing Ethan Nwaneri. He's amazing.
Where's he from?
He's amazing. He's English.
Okay.
But he's been like a big hope coming through the academy for a good few years now. He's now playing for the first team. He's only 17.
Okay.
And he stepped up because Saka's injured. They don't really have too many options. But technically, he just looks amazing.
Okay.
So I'd probably say him. Selfishly, on a United perspective, they just picked up like one player from Arsenal called Chido Obi, who made his debut against Tottenham last weekend because United can't score goals.
Yeah.
But he's 17 as well, was signed from Arsenal last year, and has been absolutely scoring tons of goals for the youth team at United. Okay. So maybe he breaks through, I don't know. And trying to think. Chelsea always have a big bunch of them. Cole Palmer's obviously the big guy at the minute. I think Chelsea have signed this lad, Kendry Paez from Ecuador, who's going to join. And there's another lad from Estevao from Brazil as well. 2 players that are going to Chelsea who are properly like rated high, but Chelsea are a bit of a mess of a football club at the minute. So I've given you 4 there.
Yeah, that's great.
So I don't know how much those guys will play for Chelsea, like straight off. Probably the most relevant one at the moment is Nwaneri, who I said at the start, because he's actually playing first team football now for Arsenal. So
yeah,
he's quality.
Really? I'll have to take I was like, it would be nice to just kind of watch a player that lesser known. You're like, oh yeah, I've been watching him since he was XYZ. He's great. do you buy Endrick as being like a wonder kid? Is he like a for sure can't miss?
I thought he was.
Hmm?
Not so sure now, to be honest.
Okay.
I'm not so sure because Real Madrid have they have a good record of buying those like young players from South America and making them. I've thought of another one who's going to City as well. Depends on whether they get relegated or not. But what's his name? Echeverri from Argentina.
Okay.
I think he's joining them next season. He's playing for like River Plate at the minute. Sorry, I forgot your last question.
Oh, it was just Endrick. If Endrick was going to be
Endrick. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he just needs a bit of time because he's pretty young as well. But look, Real Madrid are so good. They've just signed Mbappe. They always win the Champions League. They got like Bellingham is the guy that steps up, and he's only 21 or whatever it is. So they have a lot of quality there. I don't think Endrick is going to be the guy that everybody thought he was or is going to be anytime soon. I'm not saying that he's not going to be that. He's still young as hell, like really young.
Well, that was back to our Grealish point. Is like, wouldn't it be maybe better if he was at a lesser team so you get some minutes? He can be the hero for a few years, and then he goes on to the Real. Or
well, Madrid might loan him out at some point in the future if they don't end up using him. They do have a young lad, Arda Güler, as well, who is Turkish, who is quality. He's amazing. Plays a little bit, but had a really good Euros. So I don't know if Turkey are going to the World Cup, but if he'll be the star lad at the World Cup if they go, and they're pretty good. Okay. Turkey.
Nice. All right. Well, thanks for that. Has some good info. We'll have to talk again maybe at the end of the season or something. Or I need more football in my life, so I'm glad we could have you on, Scott. And where can everyone listen to you? At like the podcast list, everything you're on.
So I have, I'm doing a podcast at the moment, which I've been running for a few years. If you like Man United, I try and not be ridiculous and shout idiot at all the players, like I said earlier, like the social media stuff. I try and go a bit different away from that. It's called The Promised Land. It's on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and a few other places. Do socials as well. I'm doing a bit of, I was at Sports Illustrated, but I'm doing a bit for talkSPORT now, which is like a big station in the UK in London. And we'll see what comes next. I don't know. This is my current existence at the moment, and I'm trying to just like dip my toes in a few different things and see what. Not even in football, by the way. Like it is stuff that I'm passionate about. I might try and utilize this time now to kind of dip my toes in a little bit. But yeah, the podcast is where you can find me. Generally. All right,
perfect. Well, thanks for having you, Scott. We'll have you on again at some point. It was nice.
Thanks so much, man.
Cheers, brother.
Catching up.